The Executive Leadership Seminar that we're starting this week here on the campus focuses on looking at park management from a global perspective. It focuses on a systems approach. And we have another partner that we haven't mentioned yet, and that's Stanford University. And one of our anchor faculty, Charles O'Reilly, will be here with us tomorrow to use a leading change in organizational renewal model that he and Michael Tushman at Harvard Business School have evolved over the years, and that we've found particularly helpful in looking at national park management and our best tries at leadership in an organized and business-like way. And as you all know, those of us who are in NGOs and those of us who work for government national park systems usually work within a budget. Business survives by its acuity and its intelligence and its business acumen against a bottom line. So it does us good every now and then to look at the discipline of the business world and try to figure out how we can have a keener approach, how we can be more accountable to the taxpayers and the people that we serve, and also how we can be more accountable to the natural systems and the cultural treasures that we're there to protect. This morning we used the example of the bundle of reeds. In almost every contest where there is a competitive influence against the interests of a national park, we're outgunned. The people who would compete against us, or the entities that would compete against us, are usually better funded, better equipped, and better staffed to take on their part of the activity that they're engaged in than we are to protect ourselves against that sort of thing. And when you look at cases in point, like the size of Yosemite National Park, used to be 800,000 acres. It's 750,000 acres now. Because there were times in the history of this nation when it looked like it was better in the national interest to open mining or better to have timber extraction. We have to be vigilant for that sort of thing. And as we meet our international park system managers, we realize that this is a theme that goes on all around the world. So what if we can bundle our efforts together? And what if we can be that metaphorical bundle of reeds that's more resilient against those kinds of changes that we don't want to see? We have legislation introduced right now that is talking about protection along our borders with Homeland Security, but it would have serious consequences for conservation and park value preservation. We need to watch those kinds of things. We need to be active. And these examples go on all around the world. The other thing that we need in our partnership is science. We need the research capability of highly credentialed universities around the world. And last year when we were together, we talked about this double helix of park system protection married with all of the research services and science that our university partners can give us. That's another way that we bundle our resources together. So this gives me an opportunity to thank all of you who care enough to be out here tonight to support this sort of thing, and to thank our hosts here at the Institute of the Golden Gate, and to salute the people who came from many, many time zones away to spend 2 weeks here in the United States.
My name is David Hosley. I'm a Vice Chancellor at UC Merced, and I'm also the Executive Director of the Sierra Nevada Research Institute. And I would like to talk for a couple of minutes about the partnership that has brought all of us together here, and then introduce my friend Milton Chen. We're very pleased to be able to be here for this special night. This is the third year of the National Parks Institute, and on behalf of the leadership of the University of California's Merced campus, I want to thank all of the partners who are in the National Parks Institute. It's not like it's one or two organizations coming together to make something happen. We're a handful. And it starts with the National Park Service and the many people from the National Park Service who are participating in this year's Class 3. And as previously acknowledged, Steve Shackelton and his vision that has been made possible because he has had the support of the National Park Service in pursuing this concept that we would bring people who are going to lead our national parks here and around the world together for a concentrated period of time to talk about how you manage change. And not only managing change, but managing change in this time when almost everybody in these parks here and around the world has fewer resources to do their work than before. When we have climate change now going from something that was once debated to something that is causing our weather, and particularly here in California, we've seen it recently, to change radically. And how are we going to respond to that? Or the challenges that we have in who's coming to our parks and what do they want to do when they get there. Because I'm from the old, let's go into the backcountry and backpack for a few days, and that's not the kind of person who's coming to our parks in the majority anymore. We are having grandma and grandpa come, maybe speaking a language other than English as their first language. The mom and dad, the little kids, and all of you who are operating parks are supposed to compete equally with something that's entertaining and also at the same time informative. And there are more and more coming for the day and not for longer periods of time. And so we're asking people leading our parks to do a better job of managing and do it in this environment. And to be able to talk to other people and be in the company of people who are facing the same challenges that you may feel you're all alone in facing is a pretty wonderful thing. And so our partners in doing this, in addition to the National Park Service, the Great Valley Center, which is coordinating all of the logistics for this effort, as Steve mentioned, the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and our host tonight, the Institute of the Golden Gate. So it's a privilege for me to be working with these people. For 3 years now, I've been the coordinator of the planning for this, and I have to say to Class 3, you've already exceeded our expectations for the kind of people you are and the kind of dialogue that we're beginning to have. At UC Merced, we value greatly the relationship with the National Park Service. Our memo of understanding with Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park and Yosemite National Park was actually in place before we had any students at UC Merced. Now we have over 5,000 students, and we are the fastest growing of the University of California campuses. We are also the most diverse campus, and over half of our students are in the first in their family to go to college. That is a difference maker for California, and we cannot afford to fail in the mission that UC Merced has. I'm joined tonight by the Sierra Nevada Research Institute's Director of Development, Armando Quintero, and Eric Rowland, who is a member of our management faculty, is also here from the university. And so all of us want to salute this relationship and to celebrate it.
I like to say that 2010 is really the first year of the 21st century in education. Even though we had the first decade of the 21st century, here in the US, we spent a lot of time working on No Child Left Behind, using old ideas to try to power us into the 21st century. And now we're understanding that we need an entirely different model. The experience that Ernesto spoke to is the experience of millions of students in his generation and in my generation. They were not failing school. The school system was failing them. I've worked for George Lucas. You may know his story, that he was a student just like Ernesto, middling student in Modesto, Central Valley, maybe C's, charitably, was not planning on going to college, and through a couple accidents, one a serious car accident, and then the accident of a friend of his going to USC, the only inkling of who George Lucas is today as a kid was he did like photography. He had a darkroom at home, but it was never anything he could bring into his schooling and his education. So there are millions of kids that we're failing with our current system, but we are changing it. And I bring you some good news that 2010, things started to shift. And now we're 3 years in, just like the National Parks Institute. We're 3 years in, and we're making much quicker progress towards this new redesign of the educational system than we did in the previous decade. I think there'll be more improvement and more change in the next 5 years than the previous 10. It's a little hard to tell, but you see things like the Common Core Standards, an effort of states, believe it or not, working together to define what 21st century learning should be like. We've never had this before. Along with the Common Core Standards, you're going to see a new approach to assessment, and this is the key thing. When we talk about a new frontier in environmental education, these new assessments will head straight towards the kinds of authentic learning that we know happen in environmental education and that happen in the national parks. So get ready. There are 2 state consortia that have been formed to design these new assessments. They are much more project-based, they are much more hands-on, and much more rigorous. Most of the educational system is unaware of this. But in these workshops that these 2 state consortia have been doing, they're saying, don't wait for us in 2014. Start experimenting with this now. So I'd like to point out 5 features, I'll put it that way, of this new frontier of environmental education. The first feature of this new frontier is a change in our thinking. We're thinking in very different ways about what education is about, where it can happen, how it happens, when it happens. You know, we're not going to be tied to that traditional school year of 180 days, 9 months a year. We're coming up on the summer vacation, the long summer vacation. We have one of the longest summer vacations of any industrialized nation. At 180 days per school year, most nations have at least 200 days per school year. It's wonderful that you have this mid-level career leadership group composed of Americans as well as people in other countries to do this kind of benchmarking, to understand what other countries are doing and how they're thinking about their future education. So we're changing our thinking. We're understanding that we can now educate the entire child, the whole child. I'm looking around this room, and most of us are, well, I'm saying, again, charitably, maybe in our 40s and 50s and moving into our 60s. We were educated in a system that prized 2 things: verbal ability and math ability. In fact, there are many more than 2 intelligences. And Howard Gardner at Harvard has really led this rethinking of human intelligence. He's identified 8 different intelligences in his multiple intelligence theory. Kinesthetic intelligence. People are good at movement with their bodies. These are athletes, dancers, musicians, the musical intelligence. People who are good with other people. This is called the interpersonal intelligence. People who are good at identifying their own feelings and emotions and expressing that, the intrapersonal intelligence. And Gardner, late in this theory, added an 8th intelligence, and it was the naturalist intelligence. Each of these intelligences, the verbal, the visual, the mathematical, are located in the brain. There's neuroscience to support them. And he said, I forgot. Based on new neuroscience, there is this 8th intelligence. It's the naturalist intelligence. People who are good in nature. They're good with animals. They're good with plants. It's a different kind of intelligence, and maybe people who are good with the naturalist intelligence aren't so good with some of the other intelligences. It's not like we're equally strong at all 8. So now we're redesigning a system where students, young people, can demonstrate their skills across these different intelligences, and it's very exciting.
There has been a dramatic loss of habitat, which is truly a major tragedy, which is still taking place. Loss of habitat, deteriorations, and the way it's being encroached and fragmented. So today, tigers live in less than 7% of their original habitat, mostly on the international borders, because growth and development has pushed them in areas which are largely international borders up there, here. So it's a interesting phenomena which has to be seen in the perspective of how development and growth is taking place. The tiger numbers went down. I actually grew up in areas where we had tigers. There was a time one could see a tiger easily. But now there are only 3,200 tigers left in the wild. There are more tigers in captivity, incidentally. There are 9,000 plus tigers in tiger farms in China. There are 6,000 tigers in private captivity in the US. In the wild, there are only 3,000 tigers, 3,200 tigers. 1,700 of them are in India. So the rest of the areas, some of the areas are under severe stress, like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, China, where tigers are almost on the brink of extinction or have become extinct. The tiger crisis is also a phenomena of poaching and illegal trade. There is a very serious demand for tiger parks across the world. Of course, last year and this year, we are having a situation in which there is a surge in demand for rhino horns, for ivory in Africa. And a lot of lions are being poached for marketing as tiger parts. So there is a very major demand for tiger parts and part of the traditional Chinese medicine. The economic growth of China, of which my job was to take care of infrastructure for growth for East Asia and urbanization, is phenomenal, registering for the last 15 years a sustained growth of 8% plus, countries like China and India. Sustained growth of 8% plus, which is continuing, means an investment taking out Russia of $800 billion a year in infrastructure. In terms of urbanization, the situation is that by 2030, we will have 650 million people more living in urban areas in East Asia alone, and over 550 million people living in urban areas in South Asia. So there will be almost 1.2 billion more people moving to cities. Already the tipping point has been reached. More people live in urban areas. Why I'm bringing this factor to you is because basically I look at it from a different context, this problem. If the rate of urbanization and infrastructure growth is going to be so intense, and it is so intense, the pressure on remaining wildlife, wilderness, and habitats is going to be extremely difficult to defend. And it is important to understand this part. And last issue, which was extremely important, was that in the countries, in the tiger range countries, growth is about infrastructure and urbanization. It's about brick and mortars. It's not about saving patches of wilderness. So the paradigm of growth is such that in the ministries, when resources are allocated, this is where you get the lowest amount of resources. So these were some of the issues which had been leading to this crisis.